Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right? Oh! The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa.
Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
He picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score! And we'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs.
Welcome into the Arrowhead Addict podcast, Tuesday edition, or should I say Stuesday edition. I am Sterling Holmes, Joshua Brisco, of course. JB Brisco on the X. You can follow me at HomestretchKC. Brisco, how are you, buddy?
Listen, man, my clavicle and my sternum are both landing exactly where they're supposed to be. So I'm having a perfectly fine time. I could certainly be worse because that is still one of the ickiest football injuries I've ever heard of, and it's only happened, as far as I can remember, the 2 Chiefs in Jacksonville. So other than that, though, I'm great.
Yeah, I was trying to find a boo button on my my board I have over here. A boo button.
Oh, a boo button.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, BOO space before the next B, UTTON. Yeah. A boo button. The reason being is, of course, so I could boo you for your comment, because we don't need that. We don't need that negativity, that sort of bringing it up too soon. But yes, it does sound painful.
Yeah, and I figured we'd talk about it today. The Chiefs' number 1 wide receiver got his shoulder and chest all screwy, and I thought maybe you'd like to hear me say the word sternoclavicular, just so you had like a baseline for it. But it's a toughie.
Sternoclavicle. That's what I just go for. You just really what's his? Is it Brad Pitt? Who's the guy in
what?
You know, the movie Inglourious Bastards.
Oh yeah, sure.
Isn't that Brad Pitt?
I think so. I haven't seen the film.
It's been a long. I love the movie. Great movie. I'm just also very bad at actors and movies in general. Not my thing. All right, but let's get into it. Let's start with Hollywood Brown, because I think the repercussions of his injury are long-lasting, long-felt. Long-lasting, and he's probably missing a week or 2, but long-lasting as in he's not going to probably miss enough time to where he's on the IR, or the physically unable to perform list, which means he's going to be active game day, week 1. Which means someone's probably losing their spot, because they're probably going to go with or roll with 7 wide receivers. But let's start first with Hollywood Brown. What you saw in the first play that was A, so tantalizing, and then B, so devastating when he went down.
It was kind of fun that Mahomes did go to him on that first play, obviously, even though I know this is hard for a lot of people to hear. Sometimes Andy Reid looks you right in the eyes and lies to you for 30 straight seconds. And that's what he was doing when he said the 1s would get the first quarter and the 2s would get the second. And ultimately, we saw good old Chris Oladokun out there in the first half of a preseason game. It's like, all right, Andy, thank you for that. It was immediately exciting in the moment, right? Of like, all right, let's see this connection. Let's get a couple quality reps in. This also, I think, is true for Xavier Worthy, who I think had a look on that play that he was supposed to get, and he wasn't out there very long either, which I think is probably good news in some ways as well. But that being the first little snippet of things to come, being so quickly followed by, he's going to be sidelined for a while, and it seems pretty reasonable that he would miss the first week or 2 of the regular season. A huge bummer. And I had said a couple weeks ago here that I was not only pushing the Hollywood 1,000-yard agenda, like I was starting to go a step beyond that. It was always going to be very hard to have one standout pass catcher in this group, because in a much better version of a similar deal to last year, you actually have 4 or 5 guys who are going to demand the football in this offense. Not like, go tell Andy Reid they need the ball more, but that are going to get touches. They'll be able to spread the ball around and not just have it be out of necessity, not having any number 1 receiver and just 4 number 4s. This year, the Chiefs have a lot of guys that could reasonably be their number 2 pass catcher. And so I don't think this is like a death blow to the first couple weeks of the regular season. I think those games will still, let's say, be competitive. But it really does stink because I thought we were primed to see Hollywood take over in a pretty big way, maybe even in the week 1 kind of revenge game thing. That was all right there, and it sucks that he's going to miss that game, and he'll have to settle for beating the Ravens in the playoffs this year.
You just how Hollywood's going to obviously take over LA in 28. I thought Hollywood would take over KC in 24. We'll see. Again, a couple weeks out. I think 2 weeks is probably the thought process the first 2 weeks, and luckily the Chiefs don't play any good teams the first 2 weeks.
No.
First 2 weeks. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Easy schedule.
Easy schedule.
I think they played the Panthers twice in the first 2 weeks, which was kind of a weird thing for the schedule makers to do.
But it sucks because he is such a unique player in Kansas City. I think when people say, oh, he's an undersized guy, or if people call him a slot receiver, I think you're not doing your due diligence because he brings something completely different to the Chiefs wide receiver room. He's a legit X. He's a guy who is a deep threat, yes, but is also, as you saw in that specific play, a guy who can run a mid-route, come back to the football, catch the rock, and you're comfortable with him doing that. I don't know who takes that role. Like, Rasheed's a power slot. Xavier can play on the outside. But who's taking that Hollywood role? The only guy who has, I don't even want to say a similar skill set because I'm going to get tomatoes thrown at myself, is like Sky Moore. Like,
that's...
But no.
I had 2 other guys ahead of him on my list, and maybe 3. Maybe
but
4.
My point is, no. Like, you don't want to see that. Name whoever you're going to name, and the point is you don't want to see that guy instead of Hollywood Brown.
Right.
Now, happy news. They won a Super Bowl last year without a Hollywood Brown and the worst wide receiving core in football. Right. So not all is lost. But I am intrigued to see how this has long-lasting repercussions, at least on week 1, 53, because I was team 6 wide receivers. Mm-hmm. I wasn't team 7. I was team 6. But now, if he's going to miss a week or 2, you're probably rolling with 7. And I think Nico Remigio is making the roster because of special teams, because we saw the importance of special teams, which we can get to a little later on. Which means, does Justin Ross have a chance? Does McCole Hardman's role become more solidified? Is he the guy that takes over for Hollywood? I think most likely, yes. Does Sky Moore make it now? Tony? No. I think there's some writing on the wall with Kadarius Toney. Suited up today. Didn't take a snap was what I heard. Little intriguing situation going on with Kadarius. At some point, he might actually say, hey, maybe I am injured, because right now he ain't going to IG saying I'm not injured, because either way, he ain't getting on the field. I don't know how you view this, but you know what? It almost helps the wide receivers to make the 53, but it hurts the Irv Smiths, the CJ Hansons, and potentially, although we'll get to it, Carson Steele.
I figured we'd talk about Carson Steele today. I wrote about this a little bit over on ChiefsOnSI.com because I think that is the immediate big question about what happens, not post Hollywood, but in the time that he misses. Everything you've laid out there in terms of, again, like even if Hollywood is inactive in week 1, if he's a scratch, he must be on the initial 53-man roster. If you put a player on IR before cutdowns throughout the entire season. I think that's what happened to Justin Ross in year 1 for him ultimately, right? He was a preseason IR, and then it's essentially a redshirt year. Obviously, that's not happening with Hollywood. Even once you get past the 53, let's say Nico Remigio is the guy that they cut and practice squad and want to have be a game day activation in season. They're not going to put Hollywood on IR for 4 weeks, even designating him to return, because it doesn't seem like he's going to, hopefully, not going to need that much time to recover, didn't have to have surgery. So all of that just as a baseline of stuff you've mentioned there that makes this kind of complicated. I do think that the one player who saw his roster spot get safer when Hollywood got injured is McCole Hardman. I don't even think it's a bad thing either. I may not sound terribly enthused because his ceiling of the group of kind of bubble guys is probably the lowest. A funny thing to say about the guy who got a Super Bowl winning touchdown 6 months ago, but it's, I think, undeniably true. The best case scenario of Kadarius Toney, or the best case scenario of Sky Moore or Justin Ross, all of those ceilings are a little more enticing than 2024 McCole Hardman. But it felt like he came back as kind of a late free agency signing as a little bit of an insurance policy. And at the time, I think we would have talked about Rashee Rice and the suspension at the time that still seemed very likely. That seems less likely now, which is still kind of bizarre. And I think the NFL is in the process of handling that poorly. We'll have time to talk about that for the next 2 years, maybe. But what Mecole Hardman provides, even while being a role player in this offense, and that's not necessarily a pejorative. You need to have role players in any offense, certainly in Andy Reid's. Mecole Hardman could step in to a lot of roles that the wide receivers play on this team, and he can get where he needs to be. He can give you NFL caliber snaps, even if he's not a matchup problem or a great weapon necessarily. You can generally trust him to be out there, both mentally doing what you need and physically being there, not just with the speed, but like being on the field. He got really unfairly labeled as not being like tough enough after the whole crazy, it wasn't even a hernia, was it? What was
it was a core injury.
He couldn't feel his legs, right?
And he was playing through stuff, then took a brutal hit. And if you call Mecole Hardman not tough enough or soft, you're wrong. That is
and I think
dude.
After he talked about it, he probably got that reputation shed again. He said, I literally had no feeling in my leg for 4 days. I couldn't walk for 4 or 5 days. Got feeling back in his legs on the 6th day, and in the next couple of days he could walk. I mean, it's like crazy stuff. I mentioned all of that for Hardman because as much as I still am desperate to see what a healthy, engaged Kadarius Toney would look like, I'm also excited to know what it feels like to land on Mars. And I don't think I'm going to be able to do that in all likelihood. So you can trust Mecole to be on the field and to do the things that you need him to do. I think that was kind of the main logic behind his signing originally. And now I think he can be that guy for you, however long Hollywood is out. If Rashee Rice ends up getting suspended, if one of the other guys in the rotation gets dinged up, I think that makes Mecole a little bit more valuable. I still think there is a chance they only roster 6. You would obviously be going into game day with only 5. I think Irv Smith is the right name to mention as the tight end who's on the bubble now in terms of where that lands. I think Louis Reese-Zammit is pretty far outside looking in at this point after his preseason debut. We could talk about him more too. I'm not throwing dirt on him. I think there's still a long runway there, but in the immediate, I don't think he's helping you in week 1. That's my guess right now. But Justin Watson is going to have to take a bigger role early on. I was expecting him to have to do that while Rashee Rice was suspended. Rice probably isn't suspended. Now you have Hollywood missing for a week or two. The rest of the guys down the depth chart, I think, are still in kind of their own competition by and large. I mean, like Justin Ross is having a better camp than he had last offseason, and we're not really talking about him. And I kind of think maybe we should be. Sky Moore basically played with the ones and got like 3 targets on a bunch of snaps. Not 3 targets. I don't think he got a target.
No, 0 targets
on a whole bunch of snaps. It's a weird group still, but I think the main thing immediately impacted by Hollywood is Mecole Hardman's roster spot being even safer.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. Mecole Hardman, I kept saying, was almost a break in case of emergency. You know what he is exactly as you're laying out. You know who he is. You know what he brings. You know what he provides. Well, with Hollywood gone, that was important. It was almost a $1.1 or $1.3 million insurance policy.
Right. And
now the Chiefs are going to cash in. It sure seems like on said insurance policy. Justin Ross, let's get to it. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this.
Sure.
I don't have just the sort of hot take factory I think that some people have, whether it's good or bad in regards to Justin Ross. If he gets not put on the 53, is he getting picked up by another team? Maybe, but the point remains, the medicals are going to scare away how many teams? They didn't draft him for said reason. The medicals are still the medicals.
Sterling. I hadn't given that a lick of thought, and I don't necessarily think you're wrong. I just hadn't considered that at all. Since he has been healthy in the interim, I wonder if teams are still spooked by the college medicals. They totally might be. I just hadn't considered that.
So I think that's something to keep into consideration. The one thing I always point out with Justin Ross, when it comes to preseason games, not his fault typically. It's not Mahomes throwing him the ball. It's Wentz, it's Oladokin, it's Ian Book.
But man, is there a drop out after Carson wins? Holy bleep.
Yeah, huge. But what I find interesting is we will see these 50-50 balls when the other quarterbacks come in, because Justin Ross at that point is probably the most talented guy on the field. He might be the most talented receiver. Him, Irv Smith actually might be the guy, because Irv Smith, kind of the same thing. He's had NFL experience before. He's above these third and fourth string linebackers. But with Justin Ross, they're saying, we'll just throw the ball up to him. He'll come down with it. And he does. But who doesn't throw 50-50 balls?
Yep.
Patrick Mahomes. And so that's what it comes down to. We see all these highlights and they're great, but very rarely is it Mahomes throwing Justin Ross the rock. We saw it last year. With Justin. Do we have amnesia? Justin Ross played in games last year for the Chiefs. What did he do? He didn't have a massive opportunity, but how did he look?
And then the midseason suspension basically ended his year, so it makes it very difficult to gauge.
It does. And I'm not saying he doesn't have a chance. I'm not saying I'm not rooting for the guy, because I am. I mean, he's had a long road back, injury-riddled road back. I'm rooting for the guy. But the Chiefs are trying to three-peat, and I'm trying to be realistic. Where does he impact this team? As a wide receiver 5/6 who plays a couple snaps, and his best attribute is 50-50 balls, when Mahomes doesn't throw 50-50 balls, what's he bringing to the roster? Because special teams he isn't really going to do. He had 3 special team snaps, which, okay, that's a nice little trend. But also, you have Travis, you have Jared Wiley, who you drafted, who's kind of your red zone threat now if you're going to put him and pair him with Travis in the red zone. Noah Gray, and then Irv Smith, whatever your thoughts are on him, he's also a bigger-bodied tight end wide receiver who's not much of a blocker. Like, I know people keep saying Justin Ross wide receiver, but I'm almost throwing him into the red zone packages, right? Almost exclusively red zone packages, which means he's competing with Jared Wiley and then Irv Smith Jr. That's my thoughts. Everyone's entitled to their own. You may disagree and think Justin Ross is going for a K this year. I wouldn't bet on it.
I wouldn't even.
but like that's where I stand with Justin Ross. I'm rooting for the guy, but I think the highlights are fun, but I want to see the consistency with him, and that's the thing that we are almost lacking.
Yeah, and it's all so difficult because there's also a chicken or egg element, right? And I think we can answer it to some extent here. But the chicken or egg is, does Patrick Mahomes not throw 50-50 balls because he doesn't like them, or because he hasn't had a real 50-50 winner in his time in the pros? Does Andy Reid not acquire 50-50 ball receivers because he doesn't want to run his offense that way? Or has he never had the skill set at a reasonable value? Obviously, Ross being a UDFA, where he was never going to draft a first-round receiver who's a real big contested catch guy. He was always going to go speed, and I don't just mean Xavier Worthy. I mean, his entire NFL career is kind of slanted that direction. The fact that he's still around, man, that's the thing. So I think the proverbial chicken here is that Andy Reid does not target those types of players very often, and he does not utilize players that way very often. The one argument on behalf of the egg in this age-old debate is that he's still around. And not only is he still around now, he was still around through an exempt list 8 weeks or whatever, including the suspension last year. He was around for some bad PR. He was around in a roster spot before that happened. And the Chiefs continued to keep him on this roster. They're not doing it as a favor to Justin Ross. And if they really didn't think that it was a fit in their offense, but that there was something legitimate there, maybe he's the receiver who should be getting talked about around the rest of the league as like a little late round pick swap, and some other team who he might fit better with ought to give the Chiefs a call. I don't know. I think your skepticism is very well earned by everything that Reid and this offense typically do. But I can't fully block out the fact that he's stuck around this long with a skill set that is completely different from anybody else on this roster. I don't know if that's an advantage or a disadvantage, though, which is why I do not feel like I can make a call on him right now. I think he might be one of the 6 or 7 best wide receivers on this team. I don't know if he's Andy Reid's 8th or 9th favorite receiver on this team, or Patrick Mahomes' 8th or 9th receiver. Would they rather have Nico Remigio, who's a slight fella who can be speedy and shifty, or would you rather have a guy that looks like the NFL wide receivers that most of us remember from the early 2000s and that era of the passing game beginning to take over that way? I genuinely do not know. I have moved Justin Ross from an afterthought before training camp into a thought in camp, but I do not know. Nothing would surprise me at that point.
Sure. Two comments to get to. One from KL says, we keep talking about the jump ball, but he caught a 15-yard pass right after that. That shows growth. Yeah, that was almost more impressive. That's more the one that Mahomes would use. That's more of the Mahomes throw. The getting open, the separation. Agreed. Fair. One from Mo says, stop using Ross medical man. That's hate because he was healthy last year, and Ross had preseason passes from Mahomes, and Mahomes threw Ross that 23-yard back shoulder throw against Minnesota last year. I'm not going to sit and say it's hate because that's just silly. I said that I'm rooting for the guy. I'm not saying I'm using medicals against him.
You asked about it on behalf of other NFL teams, not even the Chiefs.
Because that's how NFL teams operate. There's a reason why a lot of teams did not go from there. It was for the back. And then he had another injury when he got to Kansas City with his foot. Like, there was multiple injuries. I'm not saying I have it off the board because the Chiefs don't have it off the board.
Right.
I'm saying, do other teams have him off the board because of the spinal injury? Not just spinal injury, but also the foot injuries.
But
there are multiple reasons why.
Not a hater, did make the point that the commenter is sort of referring to. Yeah, obviously he's been around. He was healthy but suspended last year. The question is, what happens if you cut him?
Does he get picked up?
Right. Can you sneak him to your practice squad, or is some other team interested in acquiring him with a draft pick? These are the things that I've already laid out there.
And Mo, just final thing here, man. Do you guys know football? Ross did everything in Clemson. Yeah, 6 years ago. And not just jump balls, so stop it. Ross was a deep threat in college. Yes, before the injuries. What have I been watching? I've been watching him go for 56 yards last year on 6 receptions in 10 games.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know what you're talking about here, guy.
There's just, you have to have some nuance within what you know about the Chiefs offense to talk about any of these receivers, and all of them are in group like 5 through 8 right now. So you're splitting hairs.
Yeah. That's just where I'm at right here. Again, rooting for him. Hopefully he's healthy. Hopefully, I just don't think the Chiefs use wide receivers that way. It's not the Andy Reid system. You mentioned it. They go speed. They go smaller. That's why Xavier Worthy was also drafted by the Chiefs. It's just how the Chiefs operate. When it comes to Carson Steele, this is intriguing. Andy Reid was asked point blank, do you miss the fullback? He basically said, no, we adapted, we changed.
And also the second time he'd basically been asked that question in like 2 days, but I digress.
I also think Carson Steele being labeled as a fullback is disingenuous.
I do too.
I think it's a little silly. I digress here, but it's always like, well, he lunch pail to work kind of guy. He's never played fullback.
I think somebody saw the unofficial depth chart with an FB on the line and went, oh, they moved him to fullback, when that's not how he's been used at camp. It's not how the Chiefs are using him. So I ended up watching the Jags broadcast yesterday, or at least I was watching the condensed footage because I have a serious problem. The play-by-play guy kept going, and there's Steele, the fullback. Same issue, and it's just, I mean, it's a preseason game, and it's the road broadcast, it's the opposing team broadcast, but I interrupted you to agree with you. Tell the people why that's a bad way to talk about Carson Steele.
Because he's so much more. He's learning to play fullback, right, but he's a running back. Right. Like, if you want to have him on the unofficial depth chart, that's fine. That's cool.
I promise you, Andy Reid doesn't care about the unofficial depth chart. I would bet that he has not seen the unofficial depth chart, or if he has, it was, hey, coach, can you just look at this so I can put it out? And he looked at it and went, fine. And then it was done. This is not, the coaches are not having long meetings. Yeah, the PR largely ends up, or it could be people down the assistant coaching staff. But Matt Derrick tweeted this at the time, and it's just a good reminder for everybody. Training camp reps matter. Preseason reps matter. The unofficial depth chart does not. Just a PSA from us here at Arrowhead Addict to you.
Yeah. And he's got a pet gator, which is badass, named Crocky J, which is even funnier because it's not a crocodile, which makes it great. Had it since first or second grade, 90 to 100 pounds, trying to figure out a way to get to Kansas City. But you have laws about crocodiles and where you can actually own, alligators. But dude, he's so much more. I mean, it's like almost like Christian Okoye.
Right. Well, wait.
I'm not saying he's Christian Okoye.
Start over. Compare him to somebody else.
You know what? Fine. It's Christian Okoye. No, I'm just no, I'm saying like he's 20 pounds lighter than Christian. But
understand.
the physical
The
bruising
Indiana
back,
nightmare.
Yeah, the Indiana nightmare. Oh, but it's different. Pacheco's physical. Steele's a little different. Like you saw him get first contact in the backfield.
Page says fullback now. We got to stop this.
What's that now?
Carson Steele's Wikipedia page says Carson Steele is an American football fullback for the Kansas City Chiefs. We've got to stop this. I was making sure he was in fact from Indiana. I was right. And
is it because he's white? Is this because is he now a fullback?
Yes,
this
it's
why?
one of the reasons you comping him to Christian Okoye is actually great because it's white running back wearing number 42 with flowing locks, and it's like who with a pet gator, he gives off fullback aesthetic.
Yeah,
but that's not actually the player.
He's a running back, and I think he has a really good chance of making the roster. I don't think he's going to do a ton of lead blocking. He might a little bit, but like Noah Gray is not a fullback. He's a tight end, but he was used in that role. Just because he's a running back, he might get used in that fullback role. Doesn't mean he's a fullback. He's a running back first and foremost. I do think with Clyde Edwards-Helaire's situation, he's been sick a lot, been missing some practice, missed today. If you can't trust your third running back, and I don't know what the Chiefs do with Clyde, that's another conversation to probably have. You probably want to keep four. I mean, realistically, you probably want to keep four backs, and that probably means Carson Steele is that guy. Probably him, Deneric Prince, Clyde, and then obviously Pacheco. Pacheco's going to be your bell cow in the playoffs, but he's been injured a couple times in the NFL, which is a physical position, obviously. It's a long season when you're playing 20-plus games. They're going to probably try and ease back some of that workload, which means who's going to fill in? Well, Carson Steele has a similar style, very physical. He can get downhill. You've been seeing the Chiefs struggle in short yardage situations. Enter Carson Steele. Again, you saw him get hit in the backfield and busted off for 20. He was still going. Justin Ross thought that Steele was down. It was like, oh, bleep, I got to keep blocking. How the hell is this guy still up? It's just impressive. It's something we like seeing. Like, if you liked watching Marty Schottenheimer football back in the day, like, if you liked watching that, then you like watching Carson Steele. It's like watching Pacheco, but a slightly bigger Pacheco. And by the way, good pass protector. That was one of his positives coming out of college because he is so big. It's the Mahomes bodyguard. 3rd and 12, who do you want protecting him? I might throw Carson Steele back there.
On that note, that's actually something I would love to see in the second preseason game, or really maybe I just even need to do a deeper dive for some more camp reps. I would love to see the Carson Steele in a real pass pro situation with Mahomes in a game. Maybe that's too risky right now. I don't know. Him being able to prove that would Sharpie him in, because Pacheco's clearly been doing a lot of work on pass pro. He's looked great. Just absolutely, just as we talked about, Pacific Rim against Drew Tranquil, just a couple of absolute monsters bashing heads there. But it's important to make the distinction you've already made on Steele, which is that he would be a running back who can do fullback things, not the other way around. It doesn't make sense to carry a fullback who you cannot really hand the ball to very often. Michael Burton, 2 years ago now. 3 years now? No, it was not last season. But
last year was the first year without a fullback.
Right. Burton was on the Super Bowl team that beat the Eagles, which is the way that we can now. We have to make sure we are making a distinction between Super Bowls, which is still kind of bonkers to me, even though I've been doing it for 5 years now. But being able to use that roster spot in a multiple fashion. It's why it kind of worked with Noah Gray, but if Steele can be better at that, then he could see more fullback work than Gray did by being better as a fullback. But I really do think it is. I think it's the short yardage stuff, or what happens without Pacheco, or again, especially the real, and I wonder if the Chiefs have thought this all along, or if this has been a pleasant surprise. The real questions about this group have been, who is your pass protecting back? Who is your short yardage back who is not named Isaiah Pacheco? What happens if Pacheco gets hurt? If one guy could answer all of those questions, he is as locked in as anybody. I don't know if the Chiefs fully believe he can do that or not yet, but I'm going to go back to you mentioning Clyde. And again, he's missed a bunch of practices as of late. And I don't know if he was, sick or had recently been dealing with his vomiting thing that he talked about a little bit a week or so ago. But he did not provide much juice in his preseason reps. I do also think that he got the wrong end of the trenches swap outs, because he was out there behind a struggling unit of twos that was actually missing 2 twos in that group. And I think the Jags were still bringing some heat there. At the very least, it was a bad matchup in the trenches. I'm not sure that's all Clyde's fault, but I continue to have my doubts about if he can even really be your true number 2 running back. I do still think that they're only going to roster 3 on the initial 53, though, because while it's absolutely true that maybe Clyde on a Sunday morning is having again this like cyclical vomiting thing that, sorry folks, there's nothing that anybody can do about that, to my understanding. If that happens on a Sunday morning and Deneric Prince needs to be ready, he needs to be ready. They need to have at least 2 backs on the practice squad. If they only roster 3, they ought to have 5 in the accessible pool. But you get your handful of game day elevations, and I don't think anybody else is sniping Deneric Prince or, frankly, any of the running backs that maybe other than Steele at this point that the Chiefs could end up cutting bait with. Prince was on the practice squad all year last year. I don't know if he's taken a big step or not. They sneak Prince to the practice squad, and then he's your break glass in case of emergency if Clyde can't go kind of guy. But Steele had more juice than Prince straight up against the Jags, and I kind of see it.
And with special teams now playing such a pivotal role, if you look down the NFL, I was trying to look this up. I mean, almost every single game, there was at least a team who had a 40-plus yard return. So a lot of teams, and there's going to be some teams figuring it out. And by the way, that's also teams probably keeping some things close to their chest.
Yes.
Right? So,
and on Steele, Tucker D. Franklin, the D stands for definitely watching special teams. He said today that Carson Steele was back there in personal protector spot on punt coverage, which was Jaden Hicks in the first preseason game, which is also, I think, good for him. He looked the part. But if Steele gets pushed into that role in protecting Ariza or being the first guy down in coverage around the edge like that, that means they're working him in on special teams because they think that roster spot is accessible for him.
Yeah. And so I think he provides that. You know what? We talked about it last week. You want to do it? I don't know if you have your 53-man roster at all broken down. If
no, I don't. We're going to do one later this week. But
No, that's fine. I might just go through mine very, very quickly, and you can give me your quick initial thoughts.
Yeah. Just tell me who's on who ended up being on the bubble there or whatever, and I bet we'll probably end up pretty close.
So quarterback, I had Oladokin and Ian Book.
Yep, those two for sure. Yep, absolutely.
Mahomes Wentz. Running back, I kept 4 because of the things I mentioned as far as Steele earning his way onto it, as well as, I don't know, my trust level with CEH, injury concerns, just overall with Pacheco trying to ease back on his workload. I have Pacheco, CEH, Deneric Prince, and Carson Steele, although I might even have Steele over Prince now at this point, and maybe that's a little bit of overreaction or living in the moment. But again, from what I saw, I think he brings more to the table.
I'm going to say I have one extra roster spot than you right now. I'm going to kind of track that because I'm going to say Prince gets snuck over to the practice squad. I'm on the Steele hype train now. Why not?
Okay. So wide receiver, I was 6. Now I'm 7 because of the Hollywood situation. So I'm Hollywood, Rice, Worthy, Watson, Remigio, Hardman got that role. And I think they keep Sky Moore. Everything I've heard from some folks at Arrowhead, whatever our thoughts are on Sky Moore, a little different, which means that they're most likely keeping Sky.
I don't think Nico Armigio is making the 53.
Okay. I'm fairly convinced because I think it's a Dave Tobe guy. It's just, I don't think he hardly ever plays wide receiver. I think it's strictly special teams.
That's the distinction I'm making now. I think with the way they've been talking about Kadarius Toney, I do think that's the right top 6. And so I'm going to say they're going to try to just survive week 1 with only 5 receivers. But I definitely retain the right to be proven wrong on that pretty soon. But right now I've got 2 extra roster spots.
Okay. Tight end, I'm keeping only 3. For me, it was Carson Steele or Irv Smith. I went Carson Steele. That was my original distinction. And again, with the 7 wide receivers now, there was not feasible to have 4 tight ends. So it's Kelsey, Noah Gray, Jared Wiley. I like Irv Smith, but again, with how the roster construction is breaking down, Hollywood made this thing interesting. Do you have 4?
I have 3 too at this point. Again, I haven't redone all of the math here, so I'm going to see at the end if I have extra roster spots. I may have to come back and say, you know what? Fine, Nico or Irv Smith. We had 1 extra offensive roster spot, but I'm curious if you have maybe less on the O-line than usual.
I have 9 on the O-line.
That's fine.
So
sometimes
that's 25.
10,
I just took out 10 because CJ Hansen was a guy who was my number 10. I don't know what value he's bringing right now, and I don't think he gets sniped. If you put him on practice squad, I think you get him through. 7th round guy. So I have Kingsley, Jawan, Creed, Trey Smith, Joe Tooney. My backups are Wanye Morris, Hunter Norzad, Caliendo, in that order, basically. And then Lucas Niang is my final offensive lineman. I don't really feel like you need a 10th here. And that was how I was able to. Again, partially because of Hollywood, CJ Hansen was a late scratch.
Yeah, I think that's right. Hansen, I'll add to my list of the guys that remain. I'm gonna start keeping track of who are my final cuts here.
So I have 25 offensively. And again, I think Sky Moore is one of the guys that you could release. I would have no qualms with necessarily, but just from what I've heard, it sounds like he more or less is making it. So it's
I think so too.
It's kind of more that way. It's not necessarily what I want to happen. This is more or less what I think is going to happen. Defense then. So 25 offensively is what I have. You were at 22 actually.
I'm at 22, but I'm gonna fill in the gaps here. I'm working on my big board.
Defensively, defensive line, Chris Jones, Turk Wharton, Karloftis, Mike Dana, FAU, Mike Pinnell, Malik Herring, Derek Nottie, Neil Farrell. That is 9.
They don't have to get a Minahu.
He's not. He's on the
pup
list.
list. They
Correct.
don't have to act. I did the whole thing about the IR earlier in the show. A Minahu can stay on the pup list and have a certain drop dead date there, right? 8 weeks or something.
Yeah. So that's why I have Minahu not in the 53. He's in the pup list. So
that's the right 9.
Yes.
There's
that's I don't know where else, unless you say Dickerson.
Is it Dickerson? He feels like a practice squad
Matt
block.
Guy. Yeah.
One of the UDFAs had a couple of nice reps, but not nice enough for me to remember which one it was.
Truman Jones.
Practice squad lock.
Yeah.
Did you have Malik Herring?
Yeah, Malik Herring's on there.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think you got the 9 then.
Okay. Linebacker, I went a little more bold here. Again, this is more special teams related. I kept 6. I went Bolton, Tranquil, Chanel, Jack Conklin, Cam Jones, Curtis Jacobs.
Cole Christensen to the practice squad?
Yep. I have those 6.
They also have been talking highly about Swayze Bozeman. I think 6 linebackers might be happening. Yeah, I think
they had 6 last year, by the way.
I think those numbers or those names could shuffle, but I absolutely think linebacker 6 as a special teams ace, I think is happening. And maybe it's just that Spags loves his like big brain middle of the defense players. But man, the way they have talked about some of those guys makes me think that they would keep this entire depth chart of linebackers if they could.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, Chanel did not look great.
No, he sure did. There were a couple of uh-ohs there.
Cochran looked great, and you also have Cam Jones and Curtis Jacobs, who have been getting glowing reviews. And you're right about Swayze Bozeman as well. So I think 6. And again, the new special teams, I think linebackers about the position that might be most paramount, at least those like coverage almost linebackers, like the Curtis Jacobs and the Cam Jones. Secondary, I went all encompassing because of Chamari Connor being a little bit of a confusing one here as far as safety / corner. So I went with, I think 10 secondary members. Yeah, it's 10. McDuffie, Watson, Williams, Kelvin Joseph, I think makes it on, Najee Johnson, Justin Reed, because I don't think he misses enough time to make it. He'll be on the roster.
How many corners was that? Sorry, can you...
McDuffie, Watson, Williams, Joseph
Johnson.
Najee Johnson.
Okay.
For now.
Okay.
Justin Reed, Brian Cook, Chamari Connor, Jaden Hicks, Deion Bush. Deion Bush, I think, again, is a special teams superstar.
I could see swapping out Deion Bush with whoever their next favorite, maybe Kamal Haddon if he needs to make the roster. We do there have a rookie, another rookie, maybe not making the active roster.
Echo Boydo.
But Echo is he feels like, again, like one of those like organizational practice squad type of guys where but because he weighs 102 pounds, you can keep him on your practice squad and be ready to activate him when necessary. I am kind of bullish on him too, honestly.
I'm bullish on him, but I don't think Echo Boydo makes it through to the practice squad. I think another team takes a chance on
Interesting.
Echo. I was high on
Did you
Echo
have
Boyd
Nick
last year.
Jones on your list?
Nope. He's off as well. There's so many good secondary players.
I
There's
might
so
take
many
Nick
good
Jones
ones.
over Deion Bush on the active roster just for a little bit of just to get one more corner, and you still have 4 safeties there if you count Shamari Connor as a safety, right?
But again, if he's playing more of the slot corner, then you're sitting here going, you only have 3 safeties at that point. Again, the Justin Reed injury, if he's going to miss week 1 or not, we'll find out. He was back at practice.
I think he should be good. He was in pads today, which is a huge sign.
With Jaden Hicks somewhat yesterday, maybe because we didn't really know. And then Jaden Hicks goes, yeah, Justin Reed, he was great. He was in his helmet today. And where everyone's like, oh, he was now. Nice.
Interesting. Okay. I think
and so then, of course, Reed's back today in pads. So that's good news.
Yes.
And so maybe it's Deion Bush is the odd man out. But again, I talked to Matt Derrick about this. I'm putting a ton of value in special teams. Yep. And after we saw week 1, I don't think I'm overreacting.
I think there's a chance that this ends up turning boring if the average return keeps going to the 35-yard line, that Andy Reid is going to go grab Dave Toe by the lapels and tell him to kick that ball through the back of the damn end zone.
Well, that's what I said.
In that direction.
I'm not because your average field position I was looking up in this game was farther than when just kicking it to the back of the end zone. So why would
which is unfortunate because that's not what the NFL wanted here either. Like I liked when the other than one I can think of in particular, I liked what happened when the ball was in play and the returns began. This feels like this could be I think it's probably gonna look different next year too, whatever that means. If that means going back to old rules or tinkering again. If you really don't want touchbacks, maybe you've got to put it at the 40, like when it goes out of bounds. I don't know.
I mean, it's just such a bold move. And if I'm a kicker, if I'm a team, I would actually try and do what the Jags did to McCole Hardman. Yeah. / it was Generic Prince who kind of...
Yes, it was. That's generic. A good distinction that Andy even said that was Prince's mess up and Hardman was trying to kind of cover, and obviously Hardman didn't help.
Well, and Hardman actually did try doing a smart move. I actually understand what Hardman did. If anyone's blaming McCole Hardman, I think you're a little wrong right now. Hardman tried to keep his knee in the end zone with the ball on the 1, so that way you can almost do the out-of-bounds situation.
Yes, it's like that.
We were out of bounds. He tried and touch it down right there because he thought that's how it worked. Well, the NFL, I don't think, knows how it works. So I'm glad this happened in a preseason game 1 because now we understand that, no, that's not how that works. That's going to count as a safety, which is a little weird, I don't really care either way, but I'm glad we have the distinction now.
It needs to be definite because
McCole tried being smart.
There. Yes.
McCole tried being smart, so I'm not blaming him at all. That was, I thought, almost a heads-up play that no one knows the rules, including the bleeping NFL. Yep. But now that we know what that's about, if I'm a team, if you're only getting the ball to 30 and teams are getting past you already going to the 35, 40-yard pretty consistently on kickoffs, well, I'm going to try and kick it to the 1-yard line and almost try and spin it back. Yeah. Because then they have to take it out, and at best they get to the 8. And at worst,
I think that's probably the goal anyway, right? To get it as deep into the landing zone as you can. It will be interesting. My hope for the rule at this point is that it's fun and exciting, but not necessarily game determining. Or at least if it is game determining, it's because somebody has an electric kick returner or because there's a coverage bust, not because the rules were foggy and no one at home knows what's going on.
Well, my concern is in the last sort of kickoff rules, you basically had 3 waves. You had your gunners, your fast dudes, then almost like the secondary guys, like the guys in between, and then you almost had the linebackers and your bigger guys. So you had 3 waves. If the returner got past the first wave, okay, he's probably making it to 30. There's a second wave coming. Gets past the second wave, maybe it's the 40. Very rarely to get past all 3 waves. Right. But in this new thing, at least what we've seen so far, there's just 1 wave. Just 1 wave of guys. So if you make that first wave miss, well, now all you have is open field in front of you. Again, I'm intrigued to see how this affects Kansas City specifically. I love Dave Tobe, smart guy. You think they might have an advantage here, but also, does this help bad teams? Do bad teams just focus so much on special teams like the Panthers say, hey, we're screwed either way. We're just going to spend all of our resources on special teams. We're going to start every single drive at about midfield. We pick up 15 yards, kick the field goal. Like, scoring should drastically rise, especially when it comes to field goals. You'd have to imagine a lot more, maybe 45, 50 to 55 plus yard field goals this year just because of starting field position almost You give a good return,
You
one
get
first
30
down.
yards, and yeah, absolutely.
And Harrison Butker, maybe this is even good news for him. And the Chiefs said, hey, let's give him a lot of money and a couple more years, because if this does stick around, we might foresee a lot more 55-yarders from him. I'm just intrigued to see how this goes. But I'm almost more or less with you, where this might just be a 1-year experiment and could be it.
It's just the thing that I wrote down watch after the first kickoff was I could see Andy Reid going over to Dave Tobin talking, just tell him to put through the end zone. I want it to work, but it seems like bad strategy to voluntarily play the most chaotic form of defense accessible to you, which is just 10 dudes running that way, 10 dudes running this way, and an 11th behind them, and your kicker's back there. Like it really does feel like one of the most random ways to play defense in the NFL. And the NFL did this because teams were getting too comfortable just putting it out of the back of the end zone and just starting it at the 25. I feel like we may have all overreacted, myself included, about how dramatically NFL teams would change that strategy for the sake of maybe not giving up 5 more yards. It was a 20, 4 years ago? I can't remember exactly how long ago they moved the touchback up now at this point, but
yeah, it was 20 to 25, and now it's to I believe the 30. So
yeah, and it's like, just put it in the end zone, and we'll see you at the 30.
Yeah, we'll see. And I wonder how this affects, again, the Chiefs defense, who's typically, I don't want to say bend, don't break, but they're also a defense that doesn't try and gamble and force a lot of turnovers. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, Dallas, that's their calling card with Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland. It's pick sixes. Let's gamble a little bit here. The Chiefs don't. So I'm intrigued to see the differences stylistically and what that means on point scoring. Right? Again, are the Chiefs giving up more field goals because they're not doing that? Or maybe the Cowboys are giving up more touchdowns now because instead of having to bust off an 80-yarder, it's only a 50-yard pass. Or so. Again, these are the underlying things that I'm intrigued about, being the nerd that I am.
Yeah, it will be interesting unless by week 8 most of the league has decided we'll see at the 30, and then ultimately it was a lot of wasted oxygen in practice time. I hope that doesn't happen. I think the NFL is going to try to keep that from happening, but I don't know if there's time for them to do that officially.
Yeah,
I think they could send out a memo like, "Hey guys, be cool." But I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to officially make that touchback punishment harsh enough for teams to volunteer for what we saw on Saturday.
Yeah. Again, then I have Butker, Ariza, Winchester. So that's my 53. 25 offense, 25 defense, 3 special teams, with Haddon, Boydo, CJ Hansen, Irv Smith Jr., and Justin Ross being the just on the outside looking in. And again, I think any of those guys could make it, and I would not be surprised at all.
I think I haven't actually sat down and done the whole depth chart run through. So later this week on ChiefsOnSI.com, Jordan Foote and I will have I think Friday, we're going to do right before the next preseason game. We'll have our, as it stands now, after camp and everything, kind of break it down. I think right now, I am going to go back and get that 7th wide receiver spot, but it's not for Nico or Mihio. It's for Justin Ross. He gets my Kadarius Toney, my spot recently vacated by Kadarius Toney that I could not give up on, and now I am slowly in the process of giving up on. So I'm going to say that Ross makes it. Irv Smith feels like a pretty easy practice squad stash, game day elevation if Wiley's not ready. So maybe they go ahead and because you had 9 offensive linemen, right?
Correct.
I think especially if there's some long-term thinking about Trey Smith, maybe Joe Tooney, maybe they don't want to take the risk with CJ Hansen and he stays on the squad. So those are the two spots that I vacated from your list. I'm just swapping out Nico and Justin Ross, and I'm keeping CJ Hansen over Irv Smith, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So there you go.
I don't have Irv Smith either.
I thought you kept 4 tight ends.
I have 3 tight ends. I have, let me go to generic Prince, because you have generic Prince on your practice squad. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. I feel pretty, unless Prince does something flashy. I think the Clyde thing does matter, but I'm leaning pretty strongly towards 3 running backs there for now, I think.
Are you, again, don't want to be a prisoner of the moment, don't want to overreact. Are we starting to believe that it's Steele over Prince and maybe over Clyde?
Over Prince, yes. Over Clyde, no.
Okay.
That's where I'm at right now, with the first team offense coming up this Saturday, maybe we have a totally different view. And he actually looks like the guy that we've kind of seen sparks of. I would be actually pretty happy, back to year 4 running back point, if Prince and Steele both look too good to let go through waivers. I think that's kind of a win, because again, I do still have my Clyde questions, and maybe at some point this season he has an extended absence that puts him on IR for a little bit, and it's not, doesn't really seem to be how his stuff is working right now health wise. So that might be a bit ahead of where we're at. But yeah, I kind of didn't think that I was going to be here on Carson Steele so quickly, and I'm kind of here.
Yeah, I didn't either, and I am firmly on board on this. I will also point out we are talking a lot about tight end 4, number 9 and 10 offensive line, RB 3 and 4. Wow, there's so many great corners. How can we sneak these guys onto the back of the 53, or will they go to the practice squad? We're in a damn good spot here in Kansas City. We're not talking about quarterbacks or wide receiver 1 or 2, or who's the quarterback throwing the ball to, or who's protecting the quarterback, or who's getting after the quarterback. Things are damn good here in Kansas City. We're very lucky that this is what we're talking about. We're not the Patriots going, wow, we literally have no one to throw the ball to except for Pop Douglas. Yay. Like, I mean, we're very lucky.
Martavius Bryant is back. You see that?
Who?
Martavius Bryant. Back.
Oh, yeah.
Been like 5 years, I think.
6, actually, I believe. I think it was
really?
6.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was on a practice squad last year, I think, at some point.
I think the Niners might trade Brandon Ayuk, and they have signed Robbie Chosen. So, yeah, I mean.
That's a good fit. Obviously, the same guy. Don't you think of it? You think of those two guys are the same. One of the best wide receivers in football, and a guy who's not been good in like 7 years. About the same.
Basically one and the same. I love that you haven't figured out how to turn off your Mac webcam effects.
Dude, I am a boomer.
I will say I didn't know that was an option. That rock and roll put you in a light show.
Yeah, you didn't know that I absolutely slap and know all the rules and regulations.
Hand signals.
Yeah, I'm just out here just being
Sterling is throwing up gang signs, but they're for Mac webcam filter.
Yeah, sorry that I just like to absolutely party on this bad boy.
You're not sorry.
I'm not sorry. All right, before we get out of here, any final thoughts on the rookies? Because obviously we talked about Steele. I thought Jaden Hicks looked damn impressive. First play of the game, obviously, was to Xavier Worthy, and then it got taken away, so they went to Hollywood. You know, he only played 6 snaps. That tells me they obviously really like Xavier Worthy. Yes. Same thing with Kingsley Suamataia. He talked about today how, you know, after going up against Josh Hines Allen, he was basically saying, yeah, I now know I can play in the NFL.
Right.
Stones against the guy who had 17 and a half sacks last year. Love the confidence from Kingsley. Any just overarching thoughts on the rookies here?
Yeah, I think 4 of the rookies had something happen that was interesting on Saturday at least, and 3 of them are good. Kingsley and Worthy in particular were out there early and not very often. That is what you need to know about how they fit in the group, because Patrick Mahomes was out there early and not very often. So I think, I mean, Wanya Morris being hurt ahead of that game and not being able to play certainly kind of dampened that a little bit. But I think that's been Kingsley's job to lose since they drafted him, and he has not lost it, and Wanya hasn't taken it yet. Jaden Hicks looked great. The one technical rookie that I do think had a rough day was Louis Rees-Zammit. And if anyone is surprised by that, you may have bought in a little hard. Not that he has NFL potential, because I'm keeping my options open, and I'm keeping my heart open to be ready for Louis Rees-Zammit at some point.
You're a swinger, huh?
Well, that's not what I said. But Louis Rees-Zammit's first carry was like bad to watch. It was like, oh, that guy's moving slower than everybody else. Like, he had less burst than Clyde or Prince or some of the other backs that didn't have great performances. Again, offensive line blocking was a real part of it also. I would say he didn't look very comfortable on that first carry either, which I will note makes sense because it's his first time carrying a football in a football game on any level. And I will say, to give you a little optimism, I thought his second carry, he looked much quicker and more comfortable. it makes sense that the rugby player wouldn't have the locked-in vision of an NFL veteran at running back, right? He doesn't have Le'Veon Bell's vision and patience just yet. That I think is okay. I'm not sure that he's gonna, because I think the special teams roster spot that led you to have Remigio on your list, that has made me consider the possibility that Reese Zammit makes the 53. I'm not sure his skill set there is dramatically higher than, or dramatically better than the other guys he's kind of competing with. If it's McCole Hardman back there instead of LRZ, is that worth a roster spot? Probably. Is that worth keeping CJ Hansen or whatever? Probably so. I would be stunned at this point based on common sense and some things I've heard. I'd be stunned if they cut Lewis and then some other team claimed him and he went there. It seems like he's in Kansas City to work with this offense. It would be crazy to spend all this time with this offense and then go learn the Panthers offense in a week and then it seems unlikely. And also, I don't think another team's going to put him on their 53, which you have to do if you're claiming a guy like that, at least for I think 3 weeks. So it was not an electric debut for Reese Lightning. That pun was not on purpose, but I'll take it. I don't think that that's a surprise or a death knell for his NFL career. I just think he's almost certainly starting his NFL career on the practice squad. And if he can play, if he sees the field in 2024, that's probably a win. If he sees the field in 2025, it's probably a win. So those are the little ones. Hicks looked great. Hicks, he wasn't in prime matchup territory. That always matters when you're talking about things from the second quarter or second half, even of preseason games. You have to acknowledge the opponent. But Hicks looked really comfortable, and I think that's legit.
So is Kingsley Suamataia closer to Trent Williams, Jonathan Ogden, Orlando Pace?
I mean, he's more mobile than either of the latter two there, I think, right? I mean, he's so good on the move. I think I'd be disappointed. I think I'd be like Leonard Tunsil. Laramie Tunsil, I call him Leonard. Laramie Tunsil and Trent Williams combined, I think, like if both of them had 4 arms and 4 legs, I think anything less than that, and he's a bust.
Well, I mean, luckily that's only his floor.
Yeah, exactly. He might grow 6 arms at some point.
I'll tell you what, though, I know we're being facetious, but damn, am I excited about Kingsley Suamataia. Again, 6 snaps, but I think Wanya Morris being out, and he still went out after 6 snaps, tells you a lot.
Yes, 100%. They did not pull Kingsley to make sure Wanya was getting more work. They pulled Kingsley because Kingsley's day was over.
Yep. And I think our day is over, at least on this podcast. Brisco, make sure you check him out on Twitter at JB Brisco, as well as, guess what? KCSN coming up, I think. Am I wrong? I don't know. I think it's coming up for you.
Throw up your give me the light show behind you again. Only Weird Games at about 4:30 over on KC Sports Network. Me, Nate Taylor, Seth Kaiser. We'll talk about what we saw from the preseason and what those guys are taking. Well, you've heard what I thought. You heard what Sterling thought. Come on over and see what Seth and Nate think here in about 30 minutes.
And I think we have the best listeners in the world. Thank you guys so much for listening. Yeah, this is all for you guys.
That's beautiful.
Really, it's all for you guys. If you want to give us a review, a like, we really appreciate it. That does mean a lot to us. Even to the people who were kind of mean to us. We still like you too. You know what? We still like you too. And I like to pretend that we do know ball and we can respectfully disagree. You know what? Respectfully disagree. No, we do appreciate everyone here, even the people that disagree, because it makes it fun. I enjoy disagreement.
That's true.
I thrive on disagreement. But until next week, we are out.